There's been a lot of conversation about West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin recently, but we're not talking about nominees or oil or any of those things. We're talking about where he lives in DC and what floats his boat. So Washingtonian had this article that was like 5 things to know about Joe Manchin's houseboat. And then, of course, the byline is our pal, Andrew Beaujon, who, when he is not talking to MSNBC, joins us. And we're glad you're here.
Oh, we're never going to get over that one, are we?
No, never. Andrew, oh my gosh. Like this article, because he was trending for not having a houseboat on Twitter the other day, and your article popped up. And I was like, of course, Andrew has 5 things about Joe Manchin's houseboat, which is such a 2021 headline.
Yeah, Joe Manchin's floating mansion, right?
What's the deal there? Have you like been invited on his mansion boat? What's going on?
Well, I think that, with the pandemic and everything, a lot of my invitations have slowed down. So that's probably what's going on with this one. But yeah, he's got a 65-foot houseboat docked somewhere in the Washington, D.C. region. Its name is Almost Heaven. Joe Manchin is, of course, from West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's probably a pretty nice boat. A lot of the senators like to go there and chill out.
How did you first get like hip to Joe Manchin's houseboat? Like, I know you can't reveal your sources, but why did you even like go after this?
Well, as usual, I'm meeting somebody in a like parking garage, and they're like, "Hey, did you know that Joe Manchin lives on a boat?" And and then I go and I follow it up for a couple of weeks, and then I write a blog post. But I think the funny thing about this boat is his opponents tried to make a big political issue in his re-election campaign a couple of years ago by calling his yacht. And there's a long tradition of people living on houseboats in DC. People have lived down at the wharf on houseboats for a long time, and in Old Town and a little bit farther south. So, I mean, it's actually one of the more Washington, D.C. things Joe Manchin could do is live on a houseboat.
I'm totally jealous of that. I remember when the wharf was being built out, there was all this talk of there was like a neighborhood of people who lived on the wharf, and there was like, what, will they be displaced? Like, what's going to happen? And ever since then, I'm like, how come I didn't think about living on a houseboat? I'm actually quite jealous of Joe Manchin on this fact.
Have you ever been on a houseboat in the wintertime?
No.
Yeah. That's why you don't live on
the community down. I mean, at least we've talked to the people down at the district wharf. I mean, they're like a tight almost little co-op. They rely on each other to help with a bunch of other things, whether it's walking their dogs or getting groceries, and they're like a little community down there. So it's kind of neat that he's part of that. But I guess the controversy was because he bought the boat, from reading the article, was it for about $700,000.
Well, he bought it. Actually, he got a really good deal on it.
No, he bought it for less. Yeah, that's right.
He bought it for $220.
Yeah.
And then he insured it for $700,000. And they, his opponents were saying like, this is a $700,000 residence, which if you live in Washington, D.C., you're like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, right. Except before condo fees.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are, you got to pay docking fees, so those can add up pretty quick. But I think like, if Joe Manchin was my senator, I'd be pretty happy that he was living so frugally.
Right. That's true. Versus like the Capitol Hill townhouse or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of those guys live in group houses, and that's just weird for, like grown men to like be living like that.
Yeah. I mean, a friend of mine lives down in Capitol Hill, and her building is basically like a frat house of like all these like these members who just all live in this building. So I'm always so curious about these things because you find these articles that, like, with the most due respect, are kind of weird stories, right? But like they're fascinating. And so what, like, do you ever hear, have you heard from Manchin's people, or like, how does this stuff perform when you toss something like this into the internet?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for something that connects a story to Washington, D.C. And it's funny when you're talking about somebody like a senator who lives and works here, and you still have to kind of find a way to connect to it.
Mhm.
But like, I feel like a lot of stuff that happens in Washington, especially, you know, in like capital W official Washington, isn't really something that we all think about all that much. But when you can like kind of take somebody and put them on a houseboat in the Potomac River, then it kind of becomes like a story that you actually care about. So this was actually the first time that I've really cared about Joe Manchin and his, like, you know, his I think I called it the flagship of the centrist Navy, because
Yes.
like all these senators like to, you know, like Susan Collins, like to go and join him on the boat for a glass of Merlot, which is his favorite wine.
It
Another
is
thing
kind
we
of
can
fun.
relate to.
It is kind of fun to like, and this is how we talk about the Nats, right, Tommy? I mean, we
Mhm.
don't talk about stats and how they did in their game necessarily, but we try to find that human connection where you can kind of relate to them in some sort of weird way.
Yeah, I think that that's always like what makes a successful story for us, is kind of figuring out where it actually hits the road in Washington D.C. Like what
Mhm.
people can relate to it, how it's like your everyday life here. I mean, I don't live on a boat though. I just like to make that clear. This is a basement.
Thanks for clearing that up. I mean, it is kind of long. It could have been a boat.
Yeah.
Also, breaking news: Andrew is Joe Manchin's boat neighbor.
Yeah. Ahoy.
But as we let you go, I certainly hope that this story will end up in the print edition, because I just want to see what your art department does with like Susan Collins and Joe Manchin on a boat and like the Merlot rolling, because they have to come up with some kind of imagery for that. So I'm excited for whatever art there may be.
Yeah, let's see. And can we just mention also that Almost Heaven is a DC reference too? That the song, that West Virginia's state song, Take Me Home, Country Roads, was
Yes.
written
Yes.
by
That's right.
Washington, D.C. musicians on a road trip to Gaithersburg.
Yes. Weren't they in town for the Cellar Door or what?
They lived here. They lived here, and they formed the Starland Vocal Band.
No, but
later on.
John, and then John Denver performed at the Cellar Door. Yeah,
That's
right?
exactly it.
Was it the Cellar
And he
Door?
heard it and loved it.
Yeah,
And now it's West Virginia's fourth state song.
yeah, about like Clapper Road or something.
If you do get Manchin on the record, ask him about the West Virginia song being about Gaithersburg.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna send an email to his people right now and demand.
They're not doing anything. That's fine.
And then you've got to reach out to Shelley Moore Capito to keep it, to get both of them on the record
Absolutely,
for
it. Yeah. I'd like to hear her. I'd like to hear her take on this scandal.
You've got a very busy day ahead of you, Andrew Beaujon. Of the Washingtonian. We just love you and your reporting, and thanks for being on, and thanks for just shedding more light on this awesome story about Joe Manchin and his houseboat.
Yo ho ho! See you guys later.